Welcome to the Soul Script podcast. Here we explore how to unlock the power of our story. Our journey here on earth can be one of deep passion, intentional creation, and personal transformation. The only thing holding us back is our stories. Come and join me as we rewrite and reignite. On this podcast, we talk a lot about the process of uncovering who you are. We want to rewrite our story because we have been conditioned throughout our entire life, and this is natural. This isn't something bad. We are conditioned through our teachers, our parents, our experiences, and that is okay. That's how life is meant to be. But as you get older, I think we have this desire to uncover who we are at our core and to kind of decondition ourselves from all of those experiences. So the process of waking up to who you are and uncovering that is a fun and challenging process. But one of my favorite parts of the process is uncovering your greatest gifts. What is it that comes inherently with you when you're born? And also, what are you learning and cultivating in your life that are a huge asset to yourself, your family, your community, and maybe even the world? This is a fun subject, although it can be a difficult subject. It takes a lot of uncovering sometimes and a lot of belief work to be able to really see who you are and really step into your gifts. That is what we're talking about today, and I'm going to give you one very solid tool that will help you uncover your gifts, maybe even possibly your biggest gift. I promise you that when you leave this podcast after the podcast has ended, if you listen and you take time to listen to yourself, I promise you, you are going to come out with a knowledge of one of your gifts. A very simple but powerful tool to uncover who you are at your core. Uncovering your gifts is something that I have loved, or at least the subject of gifts is something that I've loved my whole life. In church, we would talk about spiritual gifts. And anytime it was that subject in Sunday school, I would get giddy because I love the idea of each individual person having these talents that are unique to them. And, call me selfish, whatever. I am very excited about figuring out what it is that I'm contributing to the earth. And you can go so far as to want to uncover your life mission if you believe in that, but your gifts are going to set you off on that path. So we're in Sunday school and we have the Bible open, and it's a chapter that is dedicated to spiritual gifts. And there are a few spiritual gifts that you see talked about throughout the Bible. Now, I promise you this doesn't, as always, have to be a religious conversation, but this is how it started for me. So listed off in the Bible are pretty specific gifts. They're the gift of knowledge, faith, healing, receiving, miracles, discernment, tongues, and the interpretation of tongues. Now, these are super cool gifts when you think about it, how that would look in your everyday life. It's pretty rad. And how, the prophets and people who are spoken about in the Bible use these gifts. They are very big and very expansive. But that was part of the problem for me, is that these gifts were so expansive that they were really broad. And as just, a young girl living in Utah, USA, how on earth do these gifts actually apply to me? So it wasn't quite satisfying to me to learn about gifts in this way because I felt like I needed them to be more specific. As I've gotten older, I found that there is an immense list of gifts that I wouldn't have even thought about at this age and that I was never taught about. And going back to episode 1, where I went to a retreat, had my eyes opened to this incredible world of intuitive living, that is where I really learned to step into my gifts, but then also recognize that there was a huge, vast world of gifts. And so if you haven't listened to that podcast episode, go back to that podcast episode where I was really introduced into this world. So going back to this younger self where I really enjoyed learning about gifts, but wasn't quite satisfied with the ones that I was learning about in the Bible. Well, when you are in the LDS church, you are given the opportunity to get something called a patriarchal blessing. You get this blessing, well, now you can get it at any point when you feel ready, but at the time you got it when you were 14 or older. And I really looked forward to this opportunity to get a patriarchal blessing. Now, a patriarchal blessing is a blessing that is given to you from God through a patriarch. So somebody within the church who holds the authority to be able to give this blessing to you. Now, I can kind of feel you squirming in your seat when we hit the topic of who has the authority to give you messages from God. And the conclusion that I've come to is essentially that God is willing to talk to you however you are willing to listen. The universe, our creator, is willing to talk to you however you are going to listen. And for me, when I was 14 years old, I was absolutely willing to listen and really had the faith that I was going to get a message from God through this blessing. So I showed up for this blessing very anxious because in this blessing, you're often given answers or information about pretty typical things that each person who receives a patriarchal blessing sees these themes. And it's not the same patriarch for each individual person. There are many patriarchs throughout the world. You'll have one in your own little community. But there are very common themes throughout your patriarchal blessing that talk about where you've come from, what you're here to do, the gifts that you have, and what you can kind of expect to see in your future. It's not a fortune teller, it's just a general view into who you will or could have the potential to become. So I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty cool. And I think it's something that all humans seek the answers to, that we want to have the answers to. We want to know where we've come from. We want to know who we are and where we are going. And I think that is one major draw to religion, is because religion attempts to answer these questions for you. And me, very similar to the rest of the world, wanted some kind of a glimpse into the answers of these questions. So I go in and it's me and my parents. We were in the house of the patriarch, and he put his hands on my head, which is very typical for an LDS blessing. And he proceeds to give me a blessing, information given to me through God because I was willing to listen to it. And I was not disappointed in the information that was told to me through this patriarch. I was told information about where I've been, where I've come from. The part that I was most excited about, of course, is the part of the blessing that talks about my spiritual gifts. Although you're not encouraged to recite or publish your patriarchal blessing publicly, I absolutely want to read a portion of it to you that felt really important to me and has shown up so big in my life. And at the time, I had no idea how big it would show up in my life. And I anxiously awaited for the day that I did understand how this was going to show up. Because once again, it was kind of like the biblical spiritual gifts where it's a little broad And you're like, well, what does that actually look like in my life? How am I going to use that? So if you give me a minute, I'm going to pull up my patriarchal blessing and we can read a portion of it together. In my patriarchal blessing, it says the following: you have a wonderful power to love others. This will help you to love other people with a strength and beauty that will be sacred to them. It continues on with, you shall receive the gift of discernment, which will give you the power to see and understand the gifts and qualities and virtues of the people you meet. Now, as an adult, I understand what this means. And as I've uncovered myself and my talents and gifts, I have a really clear picture of what this is. But as a child, I had no idea. I don't even think I knew what discernment meant and had to go look it up in the dictionary and try to study what discernment was and how it was that I was going to be gifted with discernment. There was a time in my life when I reached out to other people that I loved and trusted, and asked them to kind of give me their perspective on what my gifts were. And during this exercise that I did, I actually received an answer where somebody told me that they felt that you were not meant to ask somebody about what your gifts were and their perspective of you, but that you needed to go internal and find the answers to these. At the time, it was actually really hurtful, and I felt like I was being chastised for my desire to reach out to other people. What I've learned now is that there are a variety of ways that people are able to uncover themselves, especially through learning human design, which is one of my favorite modalities for learning about yourself. It's fairly recently been part of my life, but I am kind of obsessed with it because I've never found anything else that does justice the complexity of each individual human. And so in human design, I have learned that people process in different ways. And sometimes we have to process externally, meaning that we need to talk to someone or even just talk out loud in order to hear our own voice to be able to process the information. And then there are other people who are completely internal. And these people don't have to talk to somebody. They don't have to talk out loud. They don't have to podcast in order to process through the experiences that they've had. I really want to honor whatever your process is. And if you're somebody who needs to reach outside of yourself in order to uncover what's inside, honor that and give yourself grace and understanding. If you're somebody who is internal and you feel pressure to talk through things with people, don't feel the pressure. Know that it is your human design to be able to learn that way. I understand where my friend, my loved one was coming from when they were giving this response back to me. Now, I do believe that this person is an extremely internal processor, and I am an extremely external processor. And that is okay. And I also think that when you go outside of yourself to ask somebody to give their perspective on you, you always have to take it with a grain of salt. You always have to realize that they do have their conditioning and their perspective based off of the experiences that they have had. So when you talk to somebody, listen to your own voice and see what resonates with you as you talk. You can listen to the emotion that comes up when you say specific things. You can see what sits well in your stomach. You can see and pay attention to where you get that fluttering in your chest, or just what doesn't feel right about what you're saying. And then if they respond back to you, and you can give them the invitation to respond back to you, and when they do, just once again, use your discernment and your power of intuition to be able to know what it is that they're saying has to do with their own past and experiences and what is something that really shines through about you. So now that I've kind of addressed that and talked about how you personally might uncover your own gifts and the process that might be best for you, I want to dive back into where we left off. I have been told that I have the ability to love others, essentially with a deep intensity, and that I have the ability to, or actually it says that I will have the ability to discern their gifts, qualities, and virtues. So this was something that, rattled around in my brain for a while, and I would gain a little bit of an understanding of it here and there. But like I said before, it wasn't until I went to a retreat called Connecting to the Divine that I really started to uncover these gifts. And that is because in this community of women who are intuitive and can tune into things that are not tangible, they're more energetic, they opened the door to an expansive list and opportunity for gifts that I didn't even know were possible. And through the years, I have been able to step into this gift of immense love for others and for having discernment. And that's what I talk to you about a lot on this podcast, is developing your own ability to discern. This gift is so beautiful to me, and the way that it's showing up in my life right now is unlike anything I imagined as a young girl. How this shows up for me is, honestly, when somebody walks into a room, I feel them and I see them, not just physically, but I see them. Now, here's a little bit of a stipulation here, is that people are really, really guarded. And so a lot of times I can't really see their true self because they have put up so many walls, and that's okay. That's part of their defense mechanism. And I don't think, walking around with your heart on your sleeve is always the best idea. And the other thing is through the years, I have learned to really respect not tuning in to everybody that walks into the room, even though I have the capacity to do that. I really try to respect it. And if somebody comes to me and is open, whether that's they're consciously open or on an energetic level, I've been invited to be able to see them. That is when I am able to really tune in and get lots of information about who they are. I know this sounds really kind of crazy. I know that, if you haven't been in this space very long to really have your own experiences of being able to feel others, that it can feel weird when I talk about this. And sometimes it can feel uncomfortable for people thinking about that. I don't know if I meet you in person that I'm going to be able to feel who you are, and that's super scary because you don't want to be seen for who you are. Like I said, I'm always respectful, and I only now tune into those who are wanting, desiring, and who are okay with it. But these gifts of loving somebody and then also being able to discern who they are, but then helping them to be able to see their gifts and qualities has brought on the most beautiful experiences that I ever think I have experienced. When somebody opens up their heart to me, I will devote my heart and soul to being able to see them. And it is my true desire to be able to help them along their pathway. My Creator has put so many people in my pathway that are ready for transformation and for growth. And through the years and through my own transformation and growth, I have learned the tools to uncover them. I've said uncover a lot in this podcast. So, like I said, today we're going to talk about a fantastic tool to uncover your gifts and recognize them. I do want to say that if you want personal help in this, you want one-on-one time, that's how I work best, is being one-on-one with somebody so that I can love on you and I can see you with intensity and beauty, and that I can help you see your beauty. I do offer sessions that are all about this, that are all about uncovering who you are, that are about rewriting your story and getting rid of the conditioning that you have brought on through the experiences in your life. So if that sounds fantastic to you, you can go to my website and you can schedule an appointment with me. I would love the opportunity to be able to work one-on-one with you. But for now, let's start with this really simple tool. So I know that these are part of me, that these are gifts that I have. But a couple days ago, I woke up and it was one of those days where I was trying to force myself to go to the gym, but I was really, really tired and I didn't want to go to the gym. And I've learned enough about myself that I need to honor when I don't have that capacity or energy to go to the gym. I learned this through, once again, human design. For those of you who are familiar with human design, I am a projector, and projectors need to have ample rest time. So there are people in the world who are like generators is what they're called, and they are able to just go, 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 go. But a projector isn't designed that way. They have stints of a push, and then they need stints of rest. So this morning, a couple days ago, I woke up and I could tell that I needed to rest. And on these days, it's funny because I may lay in bed all morning, but I'm journaling and I'm thinking and I'm visualizing. So it's actually really productive for me, even though I'm resting. And so it was one of those mornings, laying in bed in my PJs, pulling out my journal. And the reason why I decided to pull out my journal and why I think I needed to spend that time resting is because there was a lot of anxiety coming up. And this anxiety has been coming up for me for the last couple weeks to, I guess, the last month. And the interesting thing about this is that I don't really experience anxiety. That has not been a common theme in my life. Of course, I might have anxiousness about a test or, the following week, or maybe my kid is walking on the edge of a cliff. I have anxiety like that, but it's not something that just shows up for me all the time. And so this was something pulling my attention and telling me that there was something inside of me asking to be addressed and asking to be looked at. So I sat with it. And I started asking myself questions, which is one of the best ways to be able to get to the root of what it is that you're feeling. So maybe sometimes you're anxious, depressed, angry, something like that, just feeling those big emotions. And the best way I found to deal with those emotions is uncovering the root of why you are feeling those emotions. And this comes from asking lots and lots of questions. So I started off the morning with asking questions like, why am I having these feelings of anxiety? And then I pause and I let the answer come to me. And just what came to my mind was fear, which makes sense. Anxiety is basically you're in a place of fear. So then I continue digging down and I say, what am I fearing? And I wait and I listen. And the answer that came up was my podcast and social media. Okay, so what do I fear about my podcast and social channels? And I wait and I listen. And the thing that came up was being rejected and criticized for my thoughts. This is big. I mean, I don't think I'm the only one who feels nervous about sharing, your inner thoughts with the world and having the opportunity for them to be really criticized. But this for me is like the theme of my life when it comes to my biggest fear. It is the fear of what other people think. And in that moment, I thought, oh, why is this coming up again? I have done so much work on this belief or this tendency to care about what other people think about me. I want to be done with this. I thought I had been done with this. I thought I got over this. But here again, there was another layer and level of healing this part of me. But the interesting thing is I realized that I have dealt with this fear in a way that I would never give advice on dealing with a fear. And I needed to listen to my own advice, which would be to let it come up, see it rear its nasty head, look at it and see where that belief comes from. When this whole time, basically my entire life, I have been trying to shove it down. I have been trying to push, and maybe I won't feel it anymore and I won't experience that fear anymore. Another thing that I have learned through my experience and that I was reminded about at that time is that oftentimes our greatest weakness becomes our biggest strength. And I don't think that idea is probably an unfamiliar idea for you. We have been told that we can make our weaknesses into strengths. That's a theme of the Bible, but not just the Bible. It's a theme that we see all over the world. I think the idea of our weaknesses becoming our strengths is actually because when we have a strength or a gift, it comes with both sides of the pendulum. At a really high vibration, it can look fantastic. At a very low vibration, it can be our greatest weakness and it can tear us down and it can really hold us back. So I thought about this with this idea in mind that my greatest weakness could be my greatest strength. So I thought, what is the opposite of deeply caring what other people think about me? And I thought at the higher vibration of this weakness or this gift would be deeply caring about what other people think, deeply caring about individuals. Now, when I was 14 years old and I received this patriarchal blessing, I was told that I had a deep love for other people. And I felt this to be true, and this is true for me. But how it was also showing up at a very low vibration was that I was caring so much about what other people thought of me in a very selfish, self-centered, focused way. But when I take this weakness and I function at a higher vibration, then this weakness becomes beauty. And it brings me the most beautiful moments that I have experienced in my life. So this brings me to our subject today, our tool for uncovering one of our greatest gifts or our greatest gift. And I want you to think about for a moment a running theme in your life for your greatest weakness. My greatest weakness is caring what other people think about me and letting that stop me from moving forward and stop me from being myself. But your greatest weakness could be something completely different. One that's coming to mind is actually food. And your greatest weakness being an overconsumption of food and sweets and goodies. On a lower vibration, when you're using this to dampen feelings, when you're using it in fear, when you're using it to escape, this looks like an overindulgence of sweets. At its highest capacity, this kind of looks like to me that you may have an immense love for the sweetness and joy of life. And that is a huge gift, to be able to recognize how sweet life is. And when you function at a higher rate, because you are addressing your beliefs, because you're deconditioning yourself, you can experience the higher vibration of that gift rather than the overconsumption fear side of that gift. So take a second and pause. Right here, right now, we're going to do this work right now. Whether you need to pause this podcast and then restart it, we're going to take a second to just think about our greatest weakness. Maybe it's come to your mind, maybe not. If it hasn't, once again, pause this. This is such a powerful tool because I think as humans, we gravitate towards picking out our greatest weaknesses. It's very easy for us to see our weaknesses when it's harder for us to see or accept our strengths. So now that you have recognized your weakness, I want you to think about how this looks when you're vibrating at a very high level, when you're functioning well. What does this gift look like? What does it look like on a day-to-day basis? Not just this overarching theme, but through your day-to-day, what does this look like? How do you give this gift to others? How does this gift support you right now? Remember that you might process this differently than somebody else, and you might need somebody to bounce this off with. You might also need to go internally and maybe take some time to journal. If it didn't come up immediately, that's okay. But if you did receive your answer right now, I want you to not be tempted to second guess it. I want you to step into that gift. And you can do that by answering that question. What does this look like on a day-to-day basis? For me personally, sometimes it's harder to do it for other people, but we can start by doing it for us personally. And as you get used to stepping into this gift on a small scale, it will become easier and easier to do it on a bigger scale. So if you have a love of food and overindulgence of food, that can turn into your ability to be able to nourish others, whether it's through food or it's energetically. You may have a really strong ability to nourish people, but it might take you nourishing yourself first before you can nourish other people. I hope that this podcast has given you an insight into one of your greatest gifts. And I hope that you can use this tool right here and right now to be able to move forward. That's my favorite, is when you can just have an action step right now. I love you, and I'm so grateful that you were here with me today. And I just want you to pay attention to your greatest weaknesses because they could be your greatest gift. Thanks for joining me today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who needs a little inspiration. Your support makes a world of difference. Until next time, keep rewriting and reigniting your story.